Hey, welcome to the Go-To Physio podcast. My name is Dave O'Sullivan, and in season 4, it's all about building a go-to clinic that gives you happy patients, happy staff, high profits, and the freedom as a proud go-to clinic owner. My aim is to share my mistakes and my successes over the last 15 years working in professional sport and private practice, and ultimately building a go-to clinic that's given me the freedom to travel all around the world. I hope you enjoy the show. Hey, welcome back to the Go-To Physio podcast. And this season, it's all about building a go-to clinic. And I'm delighted, as always, to be joined by Paddy Mulligan, our head business coach in the Go-To Clinic Mastermind program and clinic owner of multiple clinics in Ireland. Paddy, welcome back to another episode.
Cheers, Dave. Thanks for having us. Looking forward to the topic today. I know we're going to chat a little bit about hiring and when to hire. One of the big challenges that we've faced, and a lot of people listening, I'm sure, are going to face as well.
Exactly. And today's episode is called Knowing When It's Time. Signs you're ready to hire your first or next team member. Now, we're going to talk, because I know we have a lot, and I certainly have a lot of therapists in my Go-To clinical therapist mentorship program who are solo clinic owners, and naturally, as they get the clinical systems right, the word of mouth spreads, their diaries get busy, and then it's that scary time where we have to jump to the next level. We're going to need people. We're going to need numbers, systems, and people if we want freedom. So we're going to cover this episode, Paddy, if you can, through the lens of maybe a solo clinic owner, but also more experienced clinic owner like we would be working with in the mastermind program, who have multiple therapists. And we've seen it in the program ourselves, where therapists say, I need to hire. And hiring when you are a clinic owner with multiple therapists too early can have a massive impact on the profit. And I think a lot of therapists don't realize that. So there's kind of two strands to this, Paddy, if we can keep it to maybe navigate that today, so that we can talk to both clinic owners, if that's okay.
Yeah, sounds good.
So let's get started with the first bit, I suppose, Paddy, the $1 million question. When is it time to hire? And maybe when looking back at your situation, was there any mistakes that you made when you maybe hired too soon or didn't hire quick enough? What was your experience with this yourself personally?
Interesting one, this, Dave. Okay, so I think the age-old question that we get, and I went through and go through anytime I start up a clinic, is what is the threshold and who do I hire first? And we hear it maybe every couple of weeks in the mastermind, where it's, do I hire an admin or do I hire a therapist first? So one of the kind of frameworks that we use, we need to have the consideration of the numbers, the people, and the systems, and that's what we try and look at, isn't it? So have I got the numbers of clients coming through? Have I got the patient numbers that are creating the revenue that will mean that a hire is something that's feasible for me in my clinic? One of the things we look at is, and we use, is that organizational chart. So it's looking at the bigger picture of, okay, how is the company structured? If it's just myself, what are the tasks that I'm doing at the moment that potentially I could get off my plate? And how many hours are there? So if I was to write down everything, and we call it a time review, if I was to write down everything, is there enough hours there, enough time that I can get off my plate, or key tasks that I could potentially give to an admin person? And that would generate some time for me to either fulfill more treatments or to work on the business and to help to grow the business. So that's one strand that we think about. The other thing we can think about then is, if I bring on another therapist, could they take on some of my caseload? And that will free up some time for me to do other tasks that will help me to grow the clinic. So they're the kind of two strands and thought processes at a kind of a superficial level.
And just before you kind of expand on those, Paddy, I just want to bring the listener back to a couple of key principles here. You know, I love principles first, strategy, then tactics. And the key principles here that Paddy has alluded to, and just want to highlight to you, is we're really taking the emotion out of the decision making here. So we use a tool in our program, in our business mentorship program, called a time review. Okay, and there's different levels of work that you can be doing. There's £10 an hour work, or €10 an hour. There's €100 an hour work, depending on what your hourly rate is. There's £1,000 an hour work, which is usually head physio systems work, and then there's £10,000 an hour work, which, as Paddy said, that's working on the business. So we need to understand where your time is currently, what you're currently doing. Okay, then the other big thing then, so that's more of a solo clinic owner, and very often, if you find you're doing a lot of £10 hour work, whereas actually you could be just straight away put an admin in, and now all of a sudden you're doing £100 an hour work, then that's going to make a massive difference in terms of the revenue, but it mightn't get you to your definition of success, like we talked about in previous episodes. And then the last bit there that Paddy talked about that I just want to really highlight is the ability, the key thing here is that we want to break even. As if we are a multiple therapist clinic, we want to break even on this hire as soon as possible. And we're going to talk a little bit about gross profit maybe in a second, and some of the mistakes that therapists make that we see are about to make inside of our Go To Clinic Mastermind program as well. Okay,
Yeah.
so there are some key big things. Take the emotion out of the decision making, use tools so that we can logically and just justify it, because I think a lot of times we have a busy week and we're reactive and we go, oh, I need a new hire, and then before we know it, we've got a new hire, and there's a whole host of other problems that can happen. Okay, so sorry to interrupt you, Paddy. Is there anything else?
No. I think yeah, that sparked a couple of thoughts for me, Dave. So what I would look at is to try and avoid that reactive piece, and there's a couple of considerations here. One is, what's my current utilization rate? So am I sitting at maybe 85-90% of my diary? Or if I'm a single practitioner, am I like, is my diary jam packed? Have I got people waiting for a couple of weeks? Okay, then superficially there's capacity there. The other consideration I think about is that seasonality contribution. So, okay, is it just if you're in Ireland, middle of the summer, GA season, things are absolutely booming, I'm just busy for these couple of months. God, it might drop off later on in the year, and then it could have another therapist sitting there. So that's a consideration. The other consideration is, as we might move into, is the financial piece, where we're talking about, okay, have I got some reserves there? So to mitigate risk, and one of the principles that we work off is, do I have potentially 3 times the cost of this clinician for the clinic, so the overall cost of their wage, etc., do I have that sitting there ready? So I have a bit of a buffer when the clinician comes in, because we know, and that's a whole different podcast, we know when a new clinician comes in, there's going to be challenges around retention and IA rebooking and all that kind of stuff. So there are just a couple of the metrics that we look at, and some of the things that we look at when we're considering a hire. As you touched on, ideally it would fit in with this kind of vision that we're working on, and we'd maybe have a plan for the year where we go, okay, if I hit a certain metric and I do that for maybe 6 weeks consistently, I'm in a position where I can take on another therapist or look to hire another therapist.
Brilliant. And I think the key thing there as well is seasonality, and especially if you are a clinic owner with staff and you've responsibilities of paying wages every month. This is where, as we've talked about and alluded to in the last few episodes, you have to know your numbers, you have to know your financials, and seasonality needs to be built into your budget so that you know that there is no month. So if you want to earn X amount of money a year, that should not be split over 12 months, because that's not the reality of a physio clinic. A physio clinic, most of us are going to close for 7 to 10 days at Christmas. Okay. January can be a bit hit or miss for some people. July, we're starting to see it now, school holidays. So seasonality is critical to have built into your budget so that you can see when you need to hire, and also the capacity. And then I think the other big thing then is taking into the budget, and I don't want to make all this about the budget, but understanding annual leave and stuff like that as well. So, because I think a lot of clinic owners, they don't factor in bank holidays. There's a bank holiday coming up in Ireland this weekend. Okay, so that's going to have an impact in numbers as well. So there's a whole host of factors here that need to be considered if you're a bigger clinic with multiple therapists. And even if you're about to hire your first therapist, I think this is still really good information, because I wish I knew this 15 years ago. And that is, what is the importance of understanding, Paddy, the gross profit and what that's going to do to the hire. So do you want to talk a little bit about the understanding the gross profit? And really the gross profit percentage is going to tell us whether we're ready to hire, but actually what it's also going to tell us is how much this therapist really needs to earn in order to protect their gross profit number.
So I think, like, if we're going into that and looking at the numbers, yeah, we need to have a projection of what we want. Sometimes we think, I need another therapist, I'm just going to hire them, I'll get them busy. But if we look at our gross profit and the impact on that, we can look to create projections of, well, actually, by month 1, month 2, month 3, I'll need a therapist to be seeing these numbers and seeing these amount of patients and bringing in this amount of revenue, and the impact that will have on the gross profit and ultimately my net profit. So I think it's like anything. If we have a plan and we have a structure and we have some steps that we're working towards, it gives a process to follow. So if we know if we're winning or losing, if we're on track or off track. And I think that's really important when we're bringing somebody into our world, to have a clear structure of, here's my expectations, here's what I require from you, here's how busy you're going to have to be for this to be a success, and I'll give you all the support in the world, but here's the standards and here's what I'm expecting when you come into the world. And we will relate that back to numbers, and something that us as Connect owners aren't always comfortable with. But that's how we make what sits on that gross profit, that P&L, how we make it real, and we make it real for the clinicians who are sitting there in front of us.
Yeah, and I think we've talked about this before. The language of business is accounting, and this is where we have to know our numbers first. And I think clinic owners, we all think our numbers that we need to understand is IARE books, PVAs, all of that. And yeah, we do need to know those functional key performance indicators, but the numbers in your P&L are absolutely critical. And you can see, before we're even discussing about when it's time to hire, it always comes back to this conversation. It has to come back to this conversation. Now, here's the kicker for a lot of clinicians. Your P&L is set up incorrectly in terms of your P&L. Yeah, it's set up traditionally right, but all of your therapist costs are lumped in to your fixed costs alongside your admin, and we've got no idea what's the actual impact of that. Whereas we have built out a functional P&L that I call it. And what we do with that is we just change where the therapists sit in the line. Okay, so they go what's called above the line. And then what that's going to give us then is a gross profit, where we can actually see how effective we are as a business at generating revenue from our therapists. And that gross profit percentage then is the holy grail, because that's going to be the first warning sign when your gross profit drops, because then all your other costs are fixed, even though traditionally most therapist costs are fixed. But the kicker with that, and I don't want to confuse people too much here, is our therapist utilization is so variable. Okay, so that's where it's such a great metric. When we organize our P&L right, we can see what our gross profit is. Then when we can see, okay, if I add in another therapist's salary to that above the line, what does that do to my gross profit? And then I need to go, okay, in order to maintain that gross profit percentage, if I just break even on that therapist, how much revenue do they have to generate? If I then want to get back up to where I was previously with my gross profit, what's the real revenue number that I need to bring in? Then once we understand that revenue, we need to turn that then into a volume of patients. How many patients a week do I need that therapist to see in order to hit that revenue that's going to protect the gross profit percentage? And that then is a whole different ball game in terms of getting a realistic view of this. And I'll never forget this myself, Paddy. We were sitting, I would think it was about October, November, downstairs, and we were looking at the budget for the next year. And one of my leadership team said, "Oh, we're going to need to hire there." And I was just like, "No, that's the completely wrong question." Because we just went on feel or emotion, whereas we didn't actually go on numbers. And we've seen this as well in budgets and P&Ls, where they take a therapist on and the gross profit percentage just dives. And this is happening to clinics all over the country, where because we don't understand the numbers, we make decisions in reactive mode. And before we know it, all our therapists are earning more money than us, and we've got a lot more problems, and we're probably seeing all the patients. Is there anything to add there, Paddy?
No, I think it's powerful information. I think from a functionality point of view, people might think, Jesus, we're not comfy with, okay, what is gross profit? We might understand net profit. But I think in essence, all we're doing is taking the numbers from your previous year and we're just ordering them slightly differently on your P&L sheet. So it's just gathering together information from your accountant or from Xero, whatever it might be, ordering them slightly differently. But it means for us, when a clinic comes on board with the mastermind, or if we're asked to look at a clinic, if we put the numbers, we can quickly identify, okay, this clinic is healthy potentially, or there's some trends here that we can dig into. So I think, as you say, the numbers reduce that emotional, geez, we're super busy, I'm overwhelmed, and that might be driven by stuff that's going on at home or other pressures. We need to hire. And then you're sitting there 3 months later in the middle of November going, I've got all these wages going out. How am I going to, how's this going to work? How am I going to pay everyone else? And you end up paying yourself or not paying yourself, you end up paying yourself less. So it's reducing the likelihood of that taking the emotion out of it. So I think that's the numbers piece, Dave. And I think the other part is the people piece, because as a solo clinician, it's incredibly scary. I'm going to bring another person in. I studied my degree. No one taught me about I'm going to be responsible for paying someone else's wage. I have to fulfill that and pay their wage. So there is the psychological piece of, okay, I'm going to be responsible for this person. There is the piece of, will I get on with them? Will the patients get on with them? So I think that's where we look at being really clinical again about what does the business need? So what are the roles, what are the responsibilities that the person is going to be accountable for? Okay, they're going to see patients, they're going to treat people. No, but hang on. What complements my business and where I want to go to? Do I want them to see similar patients to me to take some of the pressure off? Do I want the business to evolve so that I can specialize in a certain area? So maybe they have a special interest in women's health or rehab or whatever that might be. So again, there's a bit more of strategic thinking going. If I'm a solo clinician, what does the business need next? If I'm a multi-clinic owner, what do I need? Do I need a junior clinician? Do I need a senior clinician who's going to help in time to lead the team? Do we need a complementary service? These are the considerations. That's where we go. We take some time, we map it. Okay, what are the roles? What are the responsibilities? What does the business actually need at this time? Because too often at the moment in the current climate, when there's not people applying for jobs, we somehow make that one applicant that we get into this perfect unicorn who's going to solve all our problems. And there's a mismatch there between this perfect person who's applied, and sometimes it does happen, versus actually, here's what I need for the business. And we had this conversation, the mastermind call on Wednesday, where actually if we put out clear on what we actually need for the business, and that's what we put out there and project, we're more likely to attract the right kind of person. Because they'll read that and go, okay, cool, I can help you with that. And then we have our interview process. So I think getting over the fear by having the numbers and by really being really clear on it, actually, here's what the business needs and here's what I need for us to evolve and to grow closer to where I want to get my business to. Yeah.
Absolutely brilliant. So to recap that so far, just to, again, I want this to be this podcast, I want it to be really practical for therapists. I think you do a great job in the last few episodes, Paddy, of giving people actions to do. So I'll take this one off your hands. Step one, if you're a solo clinic owner, we need to understand, what are you spending your time on? Is there opportunities that the stuff you're spending now, we could get somebody else to do that, which frees you up to either generate more revenue, okay, or work on the business. Step two, if you're a solo clinic owner, where do we want to go next? Okay, because again, even within that, if you were to hire an admin person, there's other levers we can pull to grow the business as well, such as price. So it's not all about volume, average order value, all of those things. That there's things we could go. So that's where I would always go back to the vision. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? How do you want the business to look? How do you want to feel? Definition of success versus achievement. And really, we should be making this higher on how you want to feel on a daily basis. Definition of success is a feeling that's sustainable over time. Okay. So that's something. What do you enjoy doing the admin? Do you not enjoy doing the admin? Okay. All of these things need to come into consideration. So I think that's really important for a solo clinic owner. If you're a multi-therapist clinic owner and you've got a lot of outgoings already, you have to know your gross profit. Okay, we have to be able to take your figures and make sense of them to tell the story of the business. We need to understand what's the true number that therapist has to generate in order to not only break even, but to get you back up to that gross profit percentage ASAP. And again, for your more traditional therapist, if there's any accountants here, I would almost call this a functional gross profit percentage, because in black and white, if they're fixed costs, they're going to be treated as fixed costs. But that does not help us as clinic owners. And that's a whole different podcast episode to allow us to make better decisions. But ultimately, we as clinicians need tools to help us make better decisions. And that's essentially what we've done there, okay, is we're using tools, whether it's a time review, whether it's a functional P&L, to make the better decision that aligns with your vision and aligns with your definition of success, which is essentially the stuff that we've covered over the last couple of episodes. So hopefully you can see how it all comes together. It's like our clinical system. It builds on top of each other.
Yeah. And I think Dave, you touched on something there with the definition of success. So it's understanding what's success for you, but it's also going, if you stop and are really clinical about it and go, I actually do not want to hire somebody, I do not want to grow, I don't want that extra responsibility, that's okay. I mean, that's okay, because we do see some people who they're just not good at, and it causes them more stress and more hassle. But it's the ability to argue for and against something with some data, shall we call it. So if you can argue for and against something, you have the information, you look at it, you distill it, you take 24, 48 hours, you come back, and it should be clear where you go, no, hang on, the right thing is for me to hire. I'm clear on what I require. I'm clear on what success is. I'm ready to put it out there. And the other thing on that is we often have these conversations on the calls whereby just because we create a role and we look to push it out there, it doesn't mean we have to. Do you know what I mean? Like sometimes we're afraid to even put the advert out there because it's almost like it's a legally binding contract. I'm going to have to hire someone. No, it's not. Sometimes it's just a case of let's put the information out there. Here's what I require. But if it doesn't happen next 2-3 months, it's okay. If the right person doesn't come along, that's okay. So I don't sometimes, often what I see is the actual fear bit. It isn't the actual hire at the end. It's the actual initial bit of going, I'm going to put an advert out there with some information about what I want to help me to achieve the life that I want going forward. So I think that's often a hurdle that we perceive it's I'm going to commit and send the contract. It's actually the early stages that a lot of, especially solo clinicians, just can't seem to jump over that hurdle. That's what I tend to find anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And I've gone through interviews and I've just gone, it's not the right person, and I haven't made any hire, and I've just said, sorry, you weren't successful in the role. So, as you said, Paddy, there, hire slow, fire fast is the golden rule that everyone seems to know, but it is so true, because the right person can really accelerate this business. The wrong person can really drag it down, slow it down.
Yeah.
So I think that's really good. So we've talked, if you want freedom, if you want happy patients, happy staff, high profits, and freedom eventually, even if you're a solo clinic owner now and you want to get to that level, the three key components: you need to know your numbers, you need your people, the right people, and you need systems. And the last part here that we haven't talked about today, just to finish this episode, is systems. And I think that's the key bit that's maybe, or certainly for me, I didn't appreciate the importance of when we do hire people. Because if we don't have the systems in place, it's one thing hiring someone, and I really didn't appreciate this. This is where the real work starts. The most important thing you can do is the onboarding of this person, and the systems will be your savior with that. We have Louise, who just started with us in the as an admin actually this week. And we have literally doubled down. We're treating her now like a therapist onboarding, where Shane, my manager and head physio, has spent a lot of time with her this week, the most we've ever spent with an admin, because we've learned this mistake that if we don't onboard somebody properly, that it will come back to bite you, and you have to delay gratification, onboard them, train them. Louise is going through her admin onboarding systems, all of that stuff now. She's downstairs writing notes in the boardroom. Everything's there for her, on top of the support with Shane. So I think that's the other factor, which I'll get you to maybe chime in a sec, Paddy, is when you hire someone, you have to have the clinical or the clinic owner mindset that you're going to have time blocked in your diary, and patients aren't going to get seen for 2-3 weeks. There's going to be limited availability in your diary because you have to do a good job onboarding people then. Okay.
Yeah.
So shameless plug. That's the value to go to clinical mentorship system. We save clinic owners hours and hours of onboarding because we do the heavy lifting for them. But you have to factor that in also in terms of your decision to hire. If I go and make this decision that I'm going to hire now, am I prepared when I do hire someone to give up some time in the short term to create the systems, to create a great experience onboarding them, and then also managing them, which is a completely different podcast. So again, do you want to just add anything to that around the system piece?
Like the last two calls, the mastermind calls, I think your one and my one of the key topics was onboarding. And the uncomfortable conversation is, it's your fault, it's my fault. So invariably when the issues arise at month 6, where it's like this super energetic, great person who's going to solve all the problems isn't what happened. It's their fault. No, hang on. I didn't set them up for success. They got through my interview process, which is a step-by-step process. and they came on board with huge enthusiasm. I just didn't give the structure. So like, I know within the mastermind we have the admin onboarding, and that has been an absolute game changer. So I've got Chloe, who's sitting outside here in one of the clinics. She went through that when she came on board, and she was like, never worked in our industry before, but straight away it made sense because the principles were there. If we're thinking about bringing the person in and we're making that commitment, are we going to commit the time for them to truly understand what they're supposed to do? So do we have the time allocated? Do we block it? Do we have structure? And do we audit the success of that? Because the failures I see is that we do day one and it's a full day and it's super duper. And then it's good luck, I'll see you at the Christmas party. Hope it goes well for you. As opposed to...
Put my hand up for that.
I've done it. Whereas ideally what we want is a structure, and it could be a full day or 2 days, whatever system works for you. But then there might be, say, 2 2-hour blocks or 2 1-hour blocks per week. And it's like, God, that's a lot of commitment. Well, it'll pay itself back in spades in year 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 when that great person stays on board with you. But then there's a case of, okay, well, what am I going to cover in that time? And we potentially will, with the systems that we have, with the admin training and the clinician training systems that we have in the masterminds, we can give that to the clinician to prepare, for example, or to the admin to prepare. And then if we do the one-to-one, we can audit their understanding of the success of what they've done. And I think that's it, isn't it? It's, okay, we create a situation where they absorb the information, they disseminate it, they give their understanding, but we're giving feedback on the why behind it, or maybe the standards that we expect. And that's what creates a great hire and a great therapist and a great admin, as opposed to the 90+% of situations where somebody comes in, they're onboarded with, you know, a tea or a coffee and a bit of a chat, and then it's issues arise 6 months later. And the majority of things that we find with clinics around clinicians or admins is they didn't truly understand what they're supposed to do. They didn't understand the standards, and they weren't kept accountable to that. And it might seem like overkill, but it is a game changer when you do it well. With the right person, obviously, if you've brought the right person on board. But when you do, it accentuates or accelerates that feeling of energy and freedom that a lot of us want and require.
Absolutely brilliant. Well, that's absolutely outstanding. So I think that's a really great place to wrap up this episode, and I think it introduces nicely for the next episode, which we're going to talk a lot more about attracting and retaining top talent. So creating a clinic culture that attracts and retains that top talent. So I think that's a really good ending point for this episode, Paddy, and I think it teases up lovely for our next episode. So to summarize, numbers: solo clinic owner, time review. Okay, multi-clinic owner, time review plus P&L. Okay, numbers, done. People, who's the right person here? Okay, who does the business actually need that aligns with my definition of success? Okay, who is going to get me one step closer to my definition of success? Systems. What key systems am I going to have in place so that when I do hire this person, they're ready? And that, very often when you start looking at that, it then kind of refocusing on, actually, I'm not ready to hire. Okay, when I look at my numbers and I look at seasonality and I look at the person and I look at the systems, actually this could cause more trouble than it's worth until I get these systems in place. Okay, so there's a step-by-step process that you can follow to help you speed this up and avoid certainly the mistakes that I've made in the past. Okay, yeah. Paddy, any final words?
No, just maybe with the people piece is just be really clear on their roles and their responsibilities. So it can be as simple as, you go, I just need them to see patients. Well, I need these 3 or 4 things from somebody who comes in. I need this standard of clinical input. I need them to do 1 or 2 other roles, take classes, whatever it might be. So start to get clear on that. And same from an admin point of view. Is it to answer the phone? Is it to do follow-up calls? Is it to do your general admin? Is it to input data? And we test for that. We test, have people got the aptitude and the ability to do that? And that should be part of our interview process.
Absolutely. I think that we can definitely touch on that more in the next episode. So that's it for this week. Thank you so much again, Paddy, for your time and input there. We'll see you next week for the next episode when we're all about creating a clinic culture that attracts and retains top talent. I'll see you then. Thanks for tuning in to this week's show. I hope you enjoyed it. Now, if you'd like a free copy of my Head Physio Systems 6-step checklist that I use to personally audit my own therapists to make sure that they can keep patients progressing even when the pain is eased, so that we can ethically increase our patient numbers, our revenues and referrals, head over to www.thegotophysio.com/checklist and I'll get that sent straight over to you. That's it for this week. I'll see you in next week's show.